Hello, everyone. This is Rosemary Coates in Silicon Valley. I'm your host for this edition of the Frictionless Supply Chain Podcast. I am the executive director of the Reshoring Institute, where we help companies bring manufacturing back to the U.S. or expand their manufacturing in the U.S. And I'm a contributing writer to Supply Chain Management Review. Today, I'm really delighted to welcome our guest, Sandra Donzella, the Deputy Managing Director of Export-Import Bank of the United States, often referred to as ExIm Bank, and you can see the logo behind her head, ExIm Bank. We're going to talk about the very important work of the bank in supporting international business for American companies. So let's get started. Welcome, Sandra.
Thank you very much, Rosemary. I'm delighted to be here and appreciate the opportunity you've given me to address your membership and to basically help promote the fact that ExIm exists and the type of resources that we offer. So thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
Great. So, Sandra, tell us a little bit about your background and how you got started with ExIm Bank, your background, your career experience, your education, and so forth.
Sure. It's actually, I think it's a kind of interesting story. I did not really, initially, I thought I was going to be a dentist
Okay.
until I went to college. I went to the University of Connecticut and I changed my mind, like many young people when they go to college. And I really did not know exactly what I wanted to do, but I knew it had to be in international. I did a year abroad in Spain. I traveled throughout Europe as well as a little bit of North Africa. And I just fell in love with anything internationally, meeting new people, learning about their cultures, etc. So my father had been a banker, and I had some summer jobs at a local bank where in Connecticut. And I decided to become an international banker because everywhere I went, I saw banks. And back then, this is in the early 90s, remember the traveler's checks?
Oh,
So
sure.
I
Yep.
had an idea what international banking did. And I said, okay, I could do that. I was good with numbers. I enjoy business. So I decided to become a banker. And I joined at the time, it was Shawmut Bank. And I had nothing to do with international, but I got my foot in the door and I started networking. I reached out to folks in international banking, invited them to lunch and asked them for advice to learn about what they were doing to see if I would like it. And eventually a position opened up. They reached out to me. I applied, I got it. And from there, I was lucky enough that I started working for a bank that was active using the programs that are offered by the Export-Import Bank or EXIM. So right from the start of my banking career, I began to work with the programs that I now promote. And I joined two additional banks. Overall, I spent almost 10 years in international banking. And then I decided to move from Connecticut. And there was an opening at the regional office in California. I applied, and given all the experience I'd had, I got the job. That's how I ended up at ExIm.
Very good. Okay. And you went to the University of Connecticut, is that right?
Yes, yes. And I majored in economics and a minor in international relations. And I learned about EXIM there in an international
Yeah.
finance class.
Yeah. Yeah, I can remember learning about ExIm Bank in class too, but then there were years before I ever heard about it again. And kind of sort of a remote connection here and there I would see as I was working in supply chain management. So I think the whole topic of ExIm Bank is not well known in supply chain, but it can be so helpful for companies that are in international trade. So tell us about your role now at the ExIm Bank. What are you doing for ExIm?
So my role is to promote EXIM, the programs that we offer, try to do outreach to as many exporters in the territory that I'm assigned, as many as I can, and ensure that businesses are aware of the type of resources that we offer. I'm also responsible for collaborating with partner organizations like yours, to help us get the word out, because we do have a marketing problem, a challenge. We're a very small agency, pretty short staff, and we do not have the ability to have a local presence in every state. So we have 12 regional offices, and the role of folks like me in the field offices of ExIm is to do outreach and business development.
Okay. So it's such an interesting organization. And I just think it doesn't get enough exposure, like you were saying. You don't really have a budget for that. But this is an organization and a concept that I think supply chain people need to know about. So explain a little bit more about what the bank does, and is it totally focused on exporters or also on importers?
It's a great question. Yes. So let me give you a little bit of background about EXIM. For those of you that may not be familiar, we are America's official export credit agency. So we're not a bank. We are an independent federal agency, or headquarters are in DC, and that's where all of the credit decision and application processing takes place. And the mission of the agency is to support US jobs by facilitating US exports. And we do that by providing a series of financial solutions. You see, we recognize that often the risk of non-payment or lack of financing can be impediments to export growth. So we offer programs that minimize risk for our US exporters and address either their financing needs or the credit needs of their buyers, the importer. But everything we do is driven to support US exports, US supply chains, US manufacturing, not imports into the US. So
Okay.
part of I spent a little bit of time clarifying that, because our name does attract inquiries from importers, but it's strictly US export support. And we offer loan guarantees, a little bit similar to the Small Business Administration, with the difference that the loans that we are guaranteeing are supporting export activity. We also provide insurance, export credit insurance. In other words, peace of mind or risk protection in the event of lack of payment by international buyers. That's actually EXIM's most demanded program, because most businesses that export eventually will develop a need for it, even if it's just with one buyer, as buyers increasingly are looking for vendors willing to give them credit.
Okay.
And another important thing about EXIM is that businesses in the United States most of the time don't even realize that their competitors in other countries have similar support. There's more than 100 export credit agencies worldwide supporting their
So,
own exporters.
so
So
you don't actually directly lend money. You work through local banks. Is that right? Is that how it works?
that's correct. Well, yes and no. Most of what we do when it comes to addressing the financing needs of an exporter or sometimes the importer, um, is done through loan guarantees, where the applicant is a commercial lender, or in some cases a non-bank lender, but the goal is to help the exporter get the financing, or
Right.
sometimes it's the buyer that needs the financing. So we do have a network of lenders. We also have a direct loan option, but for us, it's more the financing option of last resort, if you will. And that's because as a small federal agency, and we have less than 400 employees, by the way, we don't have the resources to manage a direct loan product. So we rely on the banking sector by providing loan guarantees that protect the lenders. The goal is to incentivize the banking sector to have more flexibility addressing the financing
So,
needs of exporters.
so the local bank or bank that exporter is using would lend the money, but it's backed by the EXIM Bank and guaranteed by the EXIM Bank. Is that how you would
That's
explain it?
correct. That's
And
correct. And if no lender can be found, especially if the export items are big ticket items like capital equipment, machinery, being sold to buyers, say in developing countries, often the ability to access financing for that importer is going to make the difference between the U.S. exporter getting the sale. So
Right.
sometimes we do direct loans to the importer if no lender is interested or can be found, as long as we get what we refer to as reasonable reassurance or repayment. So, for
Okay.
example, we did.
So
Go ahead.
So just to clarify, so you might work through a local bank to provide financing for the exporter and insurance that they're going to get paid, right? So that your insurance product says, well, you can export, but we're going to guarantee that you're going to get paid from that other buyer somewhere in the world.
Correct. So that's two different programs, but
Okay, yeah.
basically the bread and butter, what we do are insurance for U.S. exporters that protects the exporter, the U.S. based business that is actually doing the exporting in the event of lack of payment, and the guarantee that protects the lender. But they
Okay.
supplement each other. So sometimes it could be that a business gets a sizable contract, say from Brazil, and they need financing to fulfill it. So they'll come to ExIm. We help them find a lender if they happen to be working with a lender that doesn't work with ExIm. And it's likely that that lender may say, what are your repayment terms? And if the exporter is offering credit, that lender will say you should get export credit insurance. So,
Okay.
or sometimes exporters don't even need financing, but they're selling to multiple buyers abroad and being compelled to offer some level of flexibility on the payment terms. So they have foreign exposure. So we're here to protect that exposure and help
So
them compete.
So for an exporter, it's sometimes risky business to sell to another a potential buyer or a customer in a foreign country because you don't know all the financial background. Sometimes it's not obvious. Sometimes the government controls what happens with payments and so forth. So this is a way of guaranteeing that the U.S. exporter is going to get paid in the end,
That's
right?
exactly right. We cover non-payment due to a variety of reasons, commercial and political. So for example, if the buyer declares bankruptcy or they become insolvent, or even in situations where they remain in business, if they lack cash flow, lack of cash flow is the top reason why EXIM pays claims. And that can be triggered by a number of different factors. It could be a downturn in their local economy, a devaluation in their currency, or it could even be natural disasters, a tsunami, an earthquake, God forbid it impacts their operations, as well as political risk cover, where we cover civil unrest, war, revolution, or foreign exchange restrictions, a number of different risks that exporters are basically expected to take to get sales. Mhm.
So, as from a supply chain perspective, a supply chain person working in a company would work with their finance group to find export financing so they could execute the shipment overseas, and the finance group would work with ExIm Bank to provide the export credit or with a bank that can finance the export, right?
Right. We always encourage businesses to reach out to us. We have a listing of lenders that work with us and we know their preferences. We facilitate introductions to lenders for
Okay.
exporters. So we help
So
them find a bank.
what I'm trying to understand is the connection between financing and actual execution of supply chain or execution of an export product. So I think that supply chain people need to be exposed in this way, and it's in today's environment, most companies there's integration between the various departments. So supply chain isn't standalone, the shipping department just trying to put something in a box and send it off. They have to work with the finance team inside a company to also make sure that they're going to get paid and that it can be billed and so forth. So there's a big connection there these days between supply chain operations and the financial operations of a company. And then the financial operations of the company would reach out to ExIm Bank to be a partner in that transaction. Okay, I think I get it now.
Yeah, yeah, and oftentimes, we'll get a call from the president of a company, especially if it's a small business where that person may be wearing a lot of hats and making financial decisions, supply chain decisions. So if we can get to the decision makers, usually they will orchestrate the coordination internally between their supply chain folks and finance folks.
Got it. Okay, so are there eligibility requirements or can any exporter apply to the bank for your services?
Yeah, we do have eligibility requirements. For example, we're open to support exports all over the world in about 150 countries, but the buyer's country is an important consideration. We need to be open. We have a country limitation schedule in our website, which is a listing of all the countries in the world, and is to give the public an indication of our position in a given country. So for instance, you probably can guess there's certain countries where we are off cover due to political reasons, right? Like North Korea, Iran, Russia. There are other countries, however, where EXIM is actually off cover due to economic reasons, where we feel the risk is just so high that we're not willing to take it, unless it can be externalized. So
What kind of countries are we talking about? Like
So,
African
for
countries?
example, we used to be open in Argentina years ago. We've been off cover in Argentina due to all the economic issues they've had. A
Okay.
few months ago, we went off cover in Ghana. In some countries like Pakistan, for instance, or Bangladesh, we have a lot of restrictions. So as country conditions change or country limitation schedule changes, that's one of the requirements. Also, because the mission of EXIM is to support U.S. jobs, we are bound by foreign content restrictions. So for us to engage, the items that are being exported do need to be made here and have over 50% US content. And we measure content at cost because of the components, the parts, the US labor often will bring it up substantially. And also, last but not least, EXIM does require a bit of a track record. We want to see a minimum of 3 years of sales producing history, both on the part of the exporter and the importer. And then depending on the program that's being pursued, the level of exposure we're being asked to take, it's a lot easier and less information required to do a $100,000 export invoiced insurance versus, a $400 million loan guarantee. So it all depends on the size of the transaction as well, what level of information we might need.
Okay. So does EXIM charge fees? I mean, how do you cover your costs, and are
Sure.
you making a profit in those operations?
Well, the mission of EXIM, as I've mentioned, it's really to support U.S. exports, right? And not to make money. But we do charge a fee for guaranteeing our loans, or a premium rate for providing insurance on foreign accounts receivables. These fees for insurance, for example, insurance is our most demanded program. It's more or less half of 1%. So on $100,000 export invoice going to Mexico, we're probably going to charge only $550 if it's a small business policy, or it could be $750 if it's a single buyer option. We have different options. Loan guarantees, if the U.S. exporter is looking for working capital financing, loans of up to $2 million, for instance, or we charge a 0.25% fee to the lender, but of course the lender will pass it on to the exporter. So we do charge fees, different fee scenarios for also our equipment, buyer financing solutions, where, there we'll charge a commitment fee, a facility fee, an exposure fee. At the end of
It,
the
it, it sounds like a bargain though for
Yeah,
exporters to have their exports guaranteed for a very small price. It sounds like a real bargain.
Right. Of course, the lenders will charge their interest rate. If we do a direct loan, like we've done in some cases, we will charge a rate is the commercial interest reference rate, which we publish monthly. And at the end of the day, our pricing is comparable to rates here in the United States, which is far lower than rates abroad, especially if the
Yeah.
buyer is in an emerging market or developing country. And so it's very reasonable.
Ah, terrific. Ultimately, though, to support exports, as you mentioned, ties to more US jobs, right? Because
Exactly.
the more exports that companies are doing means they're producing more and it's tied to jobs. So it sounds like it's a very popular program across the board, not only for reasons of supporting jobs in the US, but for helping even small exporters to get the job done, right? And to get guaranteed that they're going to get paid when they're exporting products. That's terrific. So, can you give us a few examples of deals that you've done that can kind of help us understand a little bit more about the programs?
Yes, and there's one example that I like to highlight, especially because I am talking to to you at the Reshoring Institute, and a ExIm actually, in addition to the or traditional product offering of loan guarantees and insurance to support export activity, we do have a new program. It was announced back in 2022. We've done so far 4 transactions, and it's called Make More in America. And it's a program to support, to basically address deficiencies in our supply chain and support the expansion of US manufacturing, especially in sectors that are critical to our national and economic security. And basically to improve the supply chain as well, and avoid such dependence on foreign supply chains. And the last transaction we approved is for a company based in Wilsonville, Oregon, by the name of ESS Tech Inc. We did a $50 million loan. Um, that's a small business. They have about 200 employees, and they design and manufacture iron flow batteries for energy storage. And
Okay.
that loan will help them triple their production. So we're very excited about that new program. We have a robust pipeline and considering to doing more. We're also looking at supporting critical minerals that are highly, important for
Yeah.
the supply chain into renewables, high technology, etc. So we've done also some letters of interest to support some projects related to minerals. We recently approved a $330 million letter of interest to support the construction of a lithium plant in Utah.
Ah,
It's a
okay.
letter of interest. So it's not a formal commitment, but the goal is to show our interest, and hopefully that will become a real transaction in the future.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a big growth area for the U.S. is the mining and refining of rare earth elements all across the US because they go into all of our electronics, right? And so much production relies on rare earth minerals that are maybe found in the US, but they aren't mined or refined in the US overseas. So there's a heavy emphasis that's being placed now, I think, in the by the U.S. government, but in general, interest levels of getting uh, minerals and rare earth elements in the US, so actually sourcing them here as much as possible. So I
yes,
think that's one of those industries that is probably not well understood, but essential for the growth of manufacturing in the US.
yes, and we're getting a lot of traction on that, and hope to play an important role. Another good example I could give you is the company located in Santa Clara, California, by the name of Forever Pure, a small business that um, reached out to ExIm because they were awarded a contract with a fertilizer manufacturer in Morocco, and they needed working capital to fulfill it. So we helped them find a lender. They obtained the loan. They successfully completed the project, and they also pursue short-term insurance from EXIM. And that's
So that's interesting. So that's different from an export finance, right? Well, a purely
what
export finance. So you're financing working capital so that they could actually build their product.
correct. So there is different. So we have different solutions, right? The Make More in America is designed to support new manufacturing facilities or plant expansions. If they have an export nexus, they need to be export oriented. The working capital guarantee is to help a US-based exporter access financing to be able to fulfill export orders or international sales contracts. And that's the example I just gave you, and for that company in Santa Clara. And what's very interesting, especially since we're talking about supply chain, is that that company, to fulfill that contract, purchased key components from another exporter that I already knew here in Vista, part of San Diego County. And so we supported the company in Santa Clara and the company in Vista that
Terrific.
provided a lot of the inputs to that transaction. And that company in Vista just last week closed their own working capital loan with a lender we introduced, so that they could get financing because they themselves are very active exporter.
Oh, terrific. That's great. So yes, well, that's what we know is supply chains are often interconnected.
Right.
So,
And go ahead.
so Sandra, you've had so much success, and this is just so interesting and something that supply chain people should know about. But I always ask at the end of these podcasts, what advice you would have for women that are coming up in their career, since you've had a long, successful career. What advice would you give to women and men as they develop their own careers?
I guess I will give the advice I've given my own children. I recently became an empty nester, so been giving a lot of career advice to my kids. They're both now in college, and basically is, if you have the ability to pursue something that you love and you're passionate about, something that you find interesting, go for it, because it won't feel like work. It will drive you, and it will it will incentivize you. That's one. Also, don't be afraid to ask questions. No question is a dumb question in my experience. And don't be intimidated by people that put you down or dismiss you. Work hard, knowledge is power, and just learn as much as you can in your field. And
That's great advice.
yeah,
Yeah.
and be self-driven. And if you can learn another language, especially if you look into go into the international field, go for it, because I would not have experienced the career growth I did if it had not been for the fact that I'm fluent in Spanish.
Ah, very good. Yeah, the idea of constant learning is one that comes up a lot. That's one that I use all the time too. I always tell people you need to learn something every single day. You need to keep learning all the time. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Sandra. It was been so interesting. Can you give us your contact information if anybody wants to learn more about the EXIM Bank?
Yes, of course. Thank you again for the opportunity. It's been a delight talking to you today. And my contact information, my cell is 619-517-1822. Or you can always email me. My email address is my first name, so Sandra, Sandra dot D as in David, O, N as in Nancy, Z as in zebra, ELLA at EXIM or exim.gov. So Sandra.Donzella at exim.gov.
Terrific. Thank you.
You're
And you can
welcome.
listen to more frictionless supply chain podcasts on Supply Chain Management Review's landing page, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can reach me, Rosemary Coates, at rcoates@Reshoring Institute, at our website, www.reshoringinstitute.org, where we publish all of our research on manufacturing in America. Thanks again, Sandra, and have a nice day,
It's
everyone.
been a pleasure. Thank you so much, Rosemary. Bye-bye.